It's 1478, inside the ruined church of St. Nicholas in Lezhë, Albania. Ottoman janissaries, the Sultan's elite killers, lose all discipline. They pound a marble tomb with sledgehammers, clawing through dust to grab the skeleton inside. They shove each other for pieces, a finger bone, a rib, hiding them in tunics, convinced these remains will make them invincible in battle. This isn't a saint's grave. It's Skanderbeg's, and even a decade after his death, the empire fears him enough to steal his power from the dead. How did one man cause such deep fear in a superpower? How did a hostage boy become the general who turned the empire against itself? If these stories of survival, betrayal, and defiance make you see history in a new light, like this video to help it reach more people. Subscribe to Dark History Untold for more on the choices that changed worlds. Comment below. Where are you watching from, and what makes stories like this stick with you? The Ottoman Empire in the early 1400s wasn't just expanding, it was devouring. From the Balkans to Anatolia, from the gates of Vienna to the shores of the Black Sea, the crescent banner flew over lands that had resisted conquest for centuries. This wasn't luck. This was a machine built on systems that turned enemies into assets, that transformed weakness into strength. At the heart of this machine was the devshirme, the blood tax. Every few years, Ottoman recruiters entered Christian villages across the Balkans. They walked through communities like livestock traders, examining boys between 8 and 18. They looked for strength, intelligence, potential. The criteria were cold: strong backs, sharp minds, no physical defects. Once selected, these boys were taken. Ripped from mothers who would never see them again. Dragged from fathers who could do nothing but watch. The boys were marched to Edirne or Constantinople, where their old lives ended. They were converted to Islam. Their names were changed. Their languages forbidden. Everything that made them Christian, that tied them to home, was systematically erased. They were trained in warfare, archery, swordsmanship, cavalry tactics, siege engineering. They learned administration, languages, the art of governance. The empire didn't just want soldiers. It wanted fanatics. Men who knew nothing but loyalty to the Sultan because they had nothing else left. These boys became janissaries, the Sultan's personal army. The most feared infantry force in the known world. They lived in barracks, never married, fought with religious fervor. They believed death in battle guaranteed paradise. They never broke ranks. They never surrendered. They were Christians turned into the weapon that would destroy Christendom. This system was genius in its cruelty. It took the sons of conquered people and made them conquerors. It prevented rebellions by removing future leaders before they could lead. It created loyalty through isolation. These men had no families to return to, no homes to defend, only the Sultan and the empire. And in 1423, this system reached the Kastrioti family. John Kastrioti wasn't just another Balkan lord. He controlled a principality in northern Albania that mattered. His lands included Kruj, a fortress perched on a cliff like a stone fist raised against the sky. He held Mat, Merdite, and Dibur, territories that controlled mountain passes, trade routes, access to the Adriatic. These weren't just strategic. They were essential. Anyone wanting to move armies south through the Balkans needed John's cooperation or his defeat. John had survived by being clever. He allied with Venice when it suited him. He made peace with Serbia when necessary. He even shifted religions, Catholic to Orthodox and back, whatever kept his lands independent and his family alive. He paid tribute to the Ottomans when their armies came close. He withheld it when they were distracted elsewhere. He was a political survivor in an age when survival meant flexibility. But flexibility only worked until someone decided you'd bent too far. Sultan Murad II, consolidating Ottoman power in the Balkans, wanted more than tribute. He wanted submission. Complete, unquestionable submission. And he knew how to get it. The demand came in 1423, send your sons to Edirne as hostages. This was standard practice for vassal states. Hostages ensured loyalty. If the father rebelled, the sons died. If the father paid tribute and obeyed, the sons lived, raised as Ottoman officials, but alive. It was insurance written in blood. John had 4 sons, Ripash, the eldest, Stanisha, Kostandin, and George, the youngest, born around 1405 in the village of Sign. He knew what sending them meant. He knew they'd be converted, trained, turned into Ottomans. He knew he'd likely never see them as Albanians again. But he also knew refusal meant invasion. His lands would be destroyed. His people enslaved. His family killed. So he sent them. John's wife, Vojsava, possibly from the noble Muzaka family, possibly Slavic, sources conflict but her nobility is certain, could only watch as soldiers took her sons. The older boys understood what was happening. George, barely 18, probably didn't grasp the full weight of his exile. He wouldn't see his homeland again for 20 years. The boys were marched to Edirne, the Ottoman capital at the time. They were separated, processed, evaluated, and within months, the older three were dead. The official story was illness. The whispered story was poison. Ripash, Stanisha, Kostandin, eliminated because they were too old, too set in their Albanian identity, too dangerous to fully convert. Or maybe it was simpler. They resisted too much. Asked too many questions. Refused to forget. Whatever the reason, George alone survived. The youngest. The most adaptable. The one young enough to be remade. He was enrolled in the Enderun School, the palace school where the empire trained its future administrators and generals. This wasn't standard devshirm treatment. Most Christian boys became common soldiers or laborers. But noble hostages? They received education. They were investments. George learned to shoot a composite bow from horseback at full gallop. He learned sword fighting, not the heavy European longsword style but the curved Ottoman killage, designed for slashing from horseback. He studied siege tactics, battlefield formations, supply chain logistics. He learned Turkish, Greek, Latin. He studied Islamic law, Ottoman administration, how the empire functioned from the inside. The training was brutal. Physical conditioning designed to break weak bodies and minds. Religious indoctrination that framed the Sultan as God's appointed ruler on earth. Psychological conditioning that made loyalty to the empire the only acceptable thought. George converted to Islam. He took a new name, Skanderbeg. In Turkish, this meant Lord Alexander, a reference to Alexander the Great. The Ottomans gave this name to promising young commanders, comparing them to the legendary conqueror. It was both honor and expectation. In later years, Europeans would corrupt this to Skanderbeg, and that's how history remembers him. For 20 years, he wore Ottoman uniforms. He led Ottoman cavalry. He fought against Christian forces, Hungarians, Serbs, Wallachians, men who spoke languages similar to his, who worshipped the same God his parents had. He fought them and he killed them and he earned promotions doing it. By 1437, he was Sabasai of Cluj, governor of his father's old stronghold. Ottoman records from 1438 list him as Juvan Oglu Iskenderbey, granting him timars, land grants given to loyal officers. These lands were in Albania, near his father's old territories. The Ottomans were rewarding him with pieces of his own heritage. In 1440, he became Sanjakbi of Dibra, governor of an entire province. He commanded 5,000 cavalry. He collected taxes. He enforced Ottoman law. He suppressed rebellions, including Albanian rebellions against the Ottomans. He crushed his own people to prove his loyalty. He fought in campaigns across Anatolia and the Balkans. When Hungarian commander John Hunyadi launched crusades against the Ottomans, Skanderbeg rode against him. When Serbian lords tried to reclaim independence, Skanderbeg helped put them down. His service record was impeccable. The Sultan trusted him. But throughout this service, he maintained secret contacts. Letters to Ragusa, a trading republic on the Adriatic. Messages to Venice, the maritime power that controlled much of the Albanian coast. These weren't treasonous communications. Officially, they were trade discussions, diplomatic pleasantries. But they were lifelines. Threads connecting him to a world outside the empire. Inside, something was building. Not a sudden realization. Not a dramatic moment of clarity. Just slow, accumulating rage. He saw how the empire worked. He watched tax collectors squeeze peasants until they had nothing left. He watched boys taken in the devshirm, knowing that had been him once. He watched forced conversions, villages burned for resisting, populations enslaved for rebellion. He governed Dibra and saw his father's old lands carved up, given to Ottoman administrators, Albanian identity slowly erased. He watched the empire's efficiency and understood, this is what happens when you lose. Your land becomes someone else's province. Your children become someone else's soldiers. Your history becomes a footnote in someone else's chronicle. His father died in 1437. Whether from age, illness, or Ottoman pressure, sources disagree. But John Kastrioti died still technically lord of his territories, still playing the game of tribute and survival, and never seeing his youngest son again. His brother Ripash had died earlier, in 1431, as a monk at Hilander Monastery on Mount Athos. The family had donated properties there in 1426. Ripash chose the church over the sword, trying to preserve something of Albanian identity in a monastery where Ottoman power couldn't reach. Skanderbeg became the last of his family, the last one who could do anything about what had been taken. And he was deep in the empire's service, trusted, valuable, seemingly loyal. But he was gathering Albanians in his units. Riders from northern territories, men who spoke Albanian when the officers weren't listening, who remembered what they'd lost. He was building a network. Slowly, carefully, waiting for the right moment. Because the empire had taught him well. It had taught him patience, strategy, how to appear loyal while planning betrayal, how to wait for weakness before striking. Albania itself was no help. It wasn't a nation, it was a collection of feuding principalities and clans that hated each other as much as they hated the Ottomans. The Dukagjini controlled the northern mountains. The Thopia held the central valleys. The Muzaka dominated the south. These families had been fighting each other for generations over grazing rights, river access, trade routes, marriage alliances. The Ottomans exploited this beautifully. They played clans against each other. They offered support to one side in a feud, then crushed both sides when they were weak. The Albanian landscape was perfect for defense: jagged limestone peaks, narrow mountain passes, thick forests, rushing rivers that could become impassable with rain. A united Albania could have been unconquerable. But unity didn't exist. Every clan looked after itself. Every lord worried more about his neighbor than the empire swallowing them all. Skanderbeg, in his Ottoman uniform with his Ottoman title, looked like part of the problem. He was the example these clans feared. What happens when you send your sons to the empire? They come back as Turks. But that appearance was about to become his greatest weapon. Because in 1443, the right moment arrived. And it arrived in the chaos of a battlefield in Serbia, where Skanderbeg saw his chance and took it with both hands. The opportunity for rebellion struck like lightning on November 3, 1443, during the Battle of Niš in Serbia. John Hunyadi, the Hungarian voivode and crusader, had launched a campaign against the Ottomans, gathering forces from Hungary, Poland, Wallachia, and Serbia to push back the Sultan's advances in the Balkans. The battle unfolded on a vast plain near the city of Niš, where Ottoman troops under Murad II faced off against the Christian coalition. The air filled with the clamor of clashing swords, the thuds of horses' hooves, and the cries of the wounded as Hunyadi's lines began to overwhelm the Ottoman flanks. Smoke from gunpowder weapons obscured the field, creating a chaotic slaughterhouse where visibility was low and confusion reigned. Skanderbeg, positioned as a commander of Ottoman cavalry units, had been waiting for a moment like this for years. His role in the Ottoman army had placed him at the heart of many battles, but here, the Crusaders' momentum provided the perfect cover. He gave a discreet signal to his 300 trusted Albanian riders, men he had handpicked from his units, sharing his secret disdain for the Sultan. These riders were not ordinary soldiers. They were from families that had suffered under Ottoman rule, and they had been primed for this defection. At the signal, they halted their charge against the Hungarians, wheeled their horses around, and began a calculated retreat from the Ottoman lines, blending into the general panic. But Skanderbeg knew a simple escape would leave him vulnerable, a fugitive without resources. He needed something more, a legitimate claim to power that could open doors without immediate suspicion. In the midst of the battlefield's disorder, he hunted down the Sultan's Reis Effendi, the chief scribe responsible for carrying the imperial seal, a tool used to authenticate official decrees. The scribe was fleeing the fray, surrounded by a small guard, when Skanderbeg and a few loyal men intercepted him. They dragged the terrified official into the shadows of a nearby tent. With a blade pressed firmly against the scribe's throat, Skanderbeg dictated the contents of a firman, an official imperial order, transferring control of the fortress of Cluj to him personally. The scribe, hands trembling, affixed the seal and signed the document. Skanderbeg, ensuring no loose ends, killed the man instantly, pocketing the firman and leaving the body hidden. The group then embarked on a grueling 7-day ride across hostile territory, crossing rivers, evading patrols, and navigating through forests to avoid detection. Skanderbeg used his Ottoman general's uniform and the forged document to bluff his way through checkpoints. At one point, near the border, a suspicious guard demanded verification, but the imperial seal, genuine and unmistakable, convinced him to let them pass. The journey was exhausting, with little food and constant fear of pursuit, but they reached Cluj without major incident. Gathered his personal effects, handed over the keys, and departed with his staff, leaving the fortress in Skanderbeg's hands. Cluj was no ordinary castle. It was an impregnable fortress built into the side of a mountain, with high walls, natural cliffs, and strategic overlooks that made it a key defensive position in the Balkans. When Skanderbeg arrived at the gates, he presented the firman to the Ottoman governor. The seal's authenticity was beyond question, and the governor, assuming it was a standard transfer of command, complied without resistance. He gathered his personal effects, handed over the keys, and departed with his staff, leaving the fortress in Skanderbeg's hands. Once inside, Skanderbeg wasted no time. That evening, as the sun set over the mountains, he walked the ramparts with his men. He personally tore down the Ottoman crescent flags that had flown there for years. In their place, he raised a red banner emblazoned with a black double-headed eagle, the ancient symbol of the Kastrioti family, representing vigilance in two directions, east and west. This act was more than symbolic. It was a declaration of independence, a call to all Albanians who remembered the old lords and resented the foreign yoke. But symbolism alone wouldn't secure the fortress. The Ottoman garrison, still present and unaware of the deception, became the immediate threat. Under cover of darkness, Skanderbeg's 300 men, aided by local Albanians who had infiltrated the town as workers or traders, launched a coordinated purge. They moved silently through the barracks and quarters, slitting throats and stabbing sleeping soldiers. The Night of Knives, as it came to be known, was brutal and efficient, leaving no survivors to raise an alarm or send word back to Edirne. By dawn, the ground around the fortress was littered with Ottoman corpses, and Cluj stood as a free Albanian stronghold for the first time in decades. As the adrenaline faded, Skanderbeg stood on the battlements, looking east toward the rising sun, and toward the inevitable Ottoman retaliation. He knew the empire's machinery intimately. The Sultan would not tolerate such a betrayal. In Edirne, councils would already be convening, grain stockpiled, weapons forged, and vast armies mobilized. Cluj was a prize, but Albania as a whole remained divided, a patchwork of feuding lords who spent more energy on internal rivalries than external threats. To these clans, Skanderbeg was an outsider, a man who had worn the enemy's colors for too long. He had the castle, but to hold it, he needed to unite a nation. If this section on deception and swift action draws you in, like the video to support more historical dives like this. Comment: in a high-stakes moment, would you rely on a forged document to claim power, or choose a different path? Subscribe for the full stories of leaders who defied odds. The morning after securing Cluj brought a stark reality. Skanderbeg had a fortress, but no unified force to defend it. Albania in 1444 was a divided land, with noble families locked in endless disputes. The Ducagini controlled northern highlands, the Thopia held central plains, the Muzaka dominated southern valleys, and others like the Arianidi, Zaharia, Genovese, Dushmani, and Spani fought over resources and influence. These lords prioritized personal gains over common threats, making the region easy prey for the Ottomans. Skanderbeg understood he couldn't force submission, he had to convince them. On March 2, 1444, he convened an assembly in Lezhë, a coastal town under Venetian control, chosen for its neutrality. No single clan could claim dominance. The Cathedral of St. Nicholas served as the venue, its stone walls echoing with footsteps as delegates arrived. Lords came with armed escorts, eyes sharp with suspicion, hands near weapons. Andrea Thopia, known for his strategic mind, represented his family. Pal Angeli, a bishop later called Paul Ignatia, brought clerical weight. George Arianidi, Skanderbeg's father-in-law, added familial ties. Even Stefan Krnajevic from Zeta in Serbia joined, seeing mutual benefit against the Turks. The air carried tension from old grudges, border skirmishes, stolen livestock, betrayed alliances. Delegates expected Skanderbeg to declare himself king or demand taxes. Instead, he stood before them, a figure in mixed attire blending Albanian heritage with Ottoman experience, and delivered a speech that shifted the room. He spoke of the Ottoman threat not as his fight, but theirs, the blood tax-taking sons, the armies that would burn villages, the loss of faith and freedom. Drawing from his years in the Sultan's court, he detailed the Janissary training, the Sipahi charges, the endless reserves. "Liberty is not a gift I bring," he declared, as recorded in Marin Barlady's 1508 biography Historia de Vita et Gestis Skanderbegi. "It resides here, among you." This line, preserved through oral traditions and later chronicles, framed the rebellion as collective defense, not personal ambition. The words landed. Lords who had viewed Skanderbeg as a Turkish outsider now saw a shared purpose. George Kastrioti, a key ally, crowned him Lord of Albania on the spot, a title symbolizing leadership without absolute rule. The League of Legia formed as a confederation. Each principality kept autonomy but pledged troops and funds for mutual aid. Skanderbeg became Captain General, commanding a combined army of 10,000 to 15,000 men. The structure allowed flexibility. Nobles like the Ducagini contributed cavalry, the Muzaka infantry, while Venice provided indirect support, viewing the League as a buffer against Ottoman naval threats. This alliance marked Albania's first step toward cohesion, halting immediate Turkish incursions. Barlady's account, though heroic in tone, draws from eyewitnesses and Venetian documents, like those analyzed by Christo Frascari, confirming the date and participants. The League's charter, though lost, outlined defense obligations, as inferred from later actions. It inspired European observers, with Pope Nicholas V later praising it as a Christian bulwark. Yet, fragility lingered. Personal loyalties held it together, vulnerable to betrayal or defeat. The League's creation transformed Skanderbeg's position. From a lone defector, he became leader of a network, ready to face the empire. With unity forged, Skanderbeg turned to warfare. Ottoman numbers dwarfed Albanian forces. 100,000 versus 15,000 in open battle meant annihilation. He adapted to the land, jagged mountains for cover, narrow passes for choke points, forests for concealment, rivers for barriers. He stripped heavy armor, training men for speed over strength. Stratiots, light cavalry on nimble horses, mastered rough terrain without stirrups, outpacing Ottoman warhorses. He built a communication web. Signal fires on peaks relayed invasions before enemies camped. Scouts on high ground spotted columns miles away, allowing preemptive strikes. This system turned geography into an ally, enabling guerrilla hits, ambush, raid, vanish. The strategy faced its first trial in June 1444. Sultan Murad II, furious at the League, sent Ali Pasha with 25,000 men to end the uprising. Ali, a seasoned commander, marched into the Black Drine Valley, expecting quick submission. Skanderbeg, with 7,000 infantry and 8,000 cavalry, baited him to the plain of Torviol near modern Turval in Kosovo. The plain favored cavalry, but Skanderbeg hid 3,000 under Hamza Kastrioti in woods. The main line engaged, drawing Ottomans forward. When committed, the signal went up, fires or horns, and hidden forces charged flanks. The envelopment created panic. Ottoman lines crumpled, cannons useless in close quarters. Albanian mobility shown, stratiots circling to cut retreats. Key moments included Hamza's cavalry breaking the Ottoman center, Skanderbeg leading charges that routed Janissaries. Casualties mounted, 8,000 Ottomans killed, 2,000 captured, Albanians lost about 400. Ali escaped barely, his army shattered. The victory's impact rippled. It solidified the League, proving unity worked. Europe took notice. Venice and Hungary sent envoys. The Pope hailed it. Ottoman chroniclers, as cited by Halil Inalcik, admitted the defeat's sting, forcing Murad to delay Balkan campaigns. Barlady describes the joy in Albanian camps, loot from Ottoman tents funding further arms. Konstantin Giersek's studies corroborate details, noting the battle's role in delaying Ottoman expansion. Skanderbeg didn't rest. He knew this was a probe. The Sultan would return stronger. By 1450, pressures mounted. Losses like Svetograd in 1448 tested the League. Murad II, seeking vengeance, led 100,000 men to Cluj, including Janissaries, Sipahis, and engineers under Mehmed II's aid. The army camped around the castle, a hilltop stronghold with rock-integrated walls. Skanderbeg split forces, 1,500 garrisoned under Vranakanti, ordered to hold indefinitely. The rest executed scorched earth, denying forage. Bombardment began, cannons thundering, stones flying. Assaults on narrow paths failed, met by bolts, rocks, oil. Murad tried sapping tunnels. One collapsed under Albanian counters. Water sources were cut, but defenders endured. Bribery targeted Vrana, 300,000 aspers and rank. He refused, vowing loyalty. Venetian merchants sold food to Ottomans, but Skanderbeg raided caravans, straining ties until Venice halted supplies. Night raids tormented the besiegers. Tents burned, sentries killed, disease spread. Ottoman casualties reached 20,000, morale plummeted. By October, winter loomed. Murad withdrew, army retreating in disorder. The siege's failure broke Murad. He died in 1451. It preserved Albanian resistance, showcasing tactics against odds. Barleti details assaults. Inalsik's Ottoman sources confirm logistics woes. Nali's biography notes European praise, calling Skanderbeg Christendom's shield. If this rise of alliance and battles engages you, like to boost similar content. Comment: how would you unite divided groups against a common foe? Subscribe for more resistance tales. Success at Cluj masked growing strains within the League. By 1455, doubts crept in among commanders exhausted by constant warfare. Moise Galami, a key lieutenant who had stood beside Skanderbeg through Torviol's ambush and Cluj's bombardment, felt the pull of Ottoman offers. Mehmed II, the new Sultan after his father's death, understood human weaknesses. He sent agents with promises: vast lands, high rank, wealth beyond Albanian mountains. Moise, perhaps worn by endless skirmishes or tempted by security, accepted. He rode to Constantinople, pledged loyalty to Mehmed, and took command of 15,000 Ottoman troops. The defection hit like a fracture in stone. Moise wasn't just any soldier. He had led independent forces, shared strategies, and earned trust from the ranks. Albanian morale dipped. If such a close ally lost faith, what hope remained? Mehmed aimed for psychological victory, sending Moise back to exploit his knowledge. The two sides met at Otuni, near modern Elbasan. Moise deployed to counter Skanderbeg's usual plays: flanks protected against ambushes, scouts watching for signals, reserves held for envelopments. Skanderbeg, with 10,000 men, adapted. He feigned disorder in his center, drawing Moise forward. As Ottoman lines committed, Skanderbeg unleashed a direct, ferocious assault he had held back. Leading the charge himself, he smashed through with infantry and cavalry, turning the battle into close-quarters chaos where numbers mattered less than resolve. The Ottomans, expecting tricks, faltered under the unexpected intensity. Moise's force broke, thousands fell or fled. He escaped to Constantinople, but Mehmed viewed failure harshly. Facing execution or disgrace, Moise realized his error. Destitute and hunted, he made a desperate return to Skanderbeg's camp at night, unarmed, a rope tied around his neck as a sign of surrender. The army gathered, expecting swift justice. Treason demanded death to maintain order. Skanderbeg faced his former friend, seeing regret in his eyes. In a move that stunned everyone, he untied the rope, pulled Moise up, and embraced him, restoring his command. Alive and loyal again, you serve us better than as a corpse, he told his officers, as Barleti recounts. The risk paid off. Moise fought with renewed zeal, dying in battle for the League years later. This forgiveness strengthened bonds, showing Skanderbeg's leadership valued redemption over vengeance, binding men through hope rather than terror. The act rippled through the Balkans, contrasting Ottoman cruelty. It preserved unity when division could have ended the resistance. 2 years later, a closer betrayal struck. Hamza Kastrioti, Skanderbeg's nephew and a battle-tested fighter, harbored resentment over his uncle's fame. Hamza believed he deserved leadership, poisoned by whispers of inheritance. He defected to Mehmed, offering insider details: mountain paths, ambush sites, signal codes. Mehmed paired him with Isaac Bey Evrinos, a reliable general, for an 80,000-strong invasion into the Mat River Valley in 1457. The force camped on the plain of Albulina, expecting guerrilla strikes. Skanderbeg, with 14,000 men, vanished into surrounding forests on Mount Tumanish. He enforced silence, No fires, minimal talk, while scouts watched. Rumors spread via planted spies. Skanderbeg had fled to Venice, his army deserted. Weeks passed. Ottoman discipline eroded in the summer heat. Soldiers rested during siestas, sentries lax, celebrations starting early. Skanderbeg waited for peak midday sun, when lethargy hit hardest. On September 2nd, he signaled the assault. 3 disciplined columns burst from the trees, thundering down slopes. They held cries until close, then unleashed war shouts as they hit tents. The surprise was complete. Ottomans woke to blades, unable to form ranks or mount horses. Skanderbeg's men cut through, focusing on command areas. Ishak Bey's structure collapsed. Hamza tried rallying but failed against the tide. The battle became a rout. Estimates vary. Barleti claims 30,000 Ottoman dead or captured. Ottoman sources like Tursun Bey acknowledge heavy losses around 15,000. Albanian casualties stayed low, under 1,000, thanks to the ambush. The field filled with bodies, the river stained red. In the aftermath, Skanderbeg's troops captured Hamza alive. The meeting lacked warmth, no embrace, just judgment. Hamza, driven by greed not fatigue, received no mercy. Imprisoned, he was later sent to Naples dungeons, far from the throne he craved. Albulina's victory echoed across Europe. The Pope again praised Skanderbeg, Venice sent aid, Hungary strengthened ties. It humiliated Mehmed, forcing him to rebuild forces. Yet it highlighted the League's vulnerability to internal threats. By 1461, Skanderbeg sought broader alliances. He answered a call from Ferdinand I of Naples, son of his old ally Alfonso, besieged by French Angevins under John of Anjou. Ferdinand's plea invoked old oaths. Skanderbeg gathered 3,000 Stradiots and sailed across the Adriatic. Italian wars differed, ritualized, with heavy knights in plate armor, sieges ending in ransoms, mercenaries fighting for pay not death. The Albanians disrupted this. Light-clad, on swift horses, they avoided frontal charges, scattering then striking flanks or rears with arrows and lances. At Barletta, they relieved the siege by harassing supply lines, forcing Angevins to retreat. French chroniclers like Philippe de Comines describe the terror. These riders move like wind, striking without warning. Skanderbeg's presence alone broke morale. His reputation as Ottoman slayer preceded him. Victories at Trani and other sites secured Ferdinand's throne. In thanks, Naples granted titles, pensions, and land, but Skanderbeg declined retirement, returning east. He hoped for a grand coalition. Pope Pius II, elected in 1458, recognized the Ottoman danger, planning a crusade in 1463. Skanderbeg was named commander of papal forces. Ships gathered in Ancona, with promises from Hungary, Burgundy, and others to join Albanian troops for a march on Constantinople. Skanderbeg prepared ports, mobilized men, and waited. Delays plagued it. Kings like Louis XI of France prioritized internal conflicts, sending excuses. Mercenaries arrived undisciplined. Pius II traveled to Ancona personally, but fell ill and died August 1464. With him gone, the crusade collapsed, fleets dispersed, funds withheld. Skanderbeg stood on Durrës shores, facing an empty horizon. The bitter truth settled. Europe admired his stand but refused to share the burden. Isolation deepened, setting the stage for Mehmed's final push. Mehmed II, now Mehmed the Conqueror after taking Constantinople in 1453, turned his full attention to Albania. The fall of the Byzantine capital sent a message of inevitability across Europe, but Skanderbeg's defiance remained a glaring exception. Mehmed viewed him not just as a rebel, but a personal challenge, a former court companion whose success mocked Ottoman supremacy. In spring 1466, Mehmed led an army of 150,000, a force larger than Albania's entire population of around 200,000. This wasn't conquest, it was eradication, with janissaries, heavy artillery, and engineers ready to level mountains if needed. Skanderbeg, with only 13,000 men, knew direct confrontation equaled death. He issued orders for scorched earth, evacuate lowlands, burn wheat fields, slaughter movable livestock, poison wells. Villages emptied, smoke rose from deliberate fires, leaving a barren landscape. The policy starved his people too, but survival demanded it. Mehmed's army marched into ash, supply lines stretching thin across hostile ground. Hunger set in before battles began, horses foraging bark, soldiers weakening. The main target was Cluj, symbol of resistance. Mehmed encircled it with tents and trenches, unleashing bombardment from cannons far advanced over his father's, bronze monsters hurling stones that cracked walls. The garrison, 4,000 under Tanush Thopia, repaired breaches nightly, rationing water and food. Assaults came in waves, janissaries scaling ladders, only to face boiling pitch, arrows, and rocks on narrow ledges. One major push in July saw 5,000 Ottomans fall. Thopia's men held, inspired by signals from Skanderbeg's external forces. Outside, Skanderbeg waged shadow war. His Stradiots struck convoys, stealing grain and weapons, vanishing into hills. Night attacks kept Ottomans alert, morale low. Mehmed adapted, building palisades around camps, but disease, dysentery from bad water, claimed thousands. Frustration boiled over at Kidna, a smaller outpost sheltering refugees. Cut off from water, defenders negotiated surrender on Mehmed's oath of mercy. Gates opened. The conqueror, patron of scholars and speaker of 6 languages, revealed his ruthlessness. He ordered total massacre, 400 men beheaded in rows, commanders skinned alive as examples, women and children enslaved or slain. Bodies displayed on stakes, a deliberate horror to force Skanderbeg's submission. From distant peaks, he witnessed the smoke, the weight of every death pressing on his choices. The siege dragged into autumn. Cluj's walls, fused with mountain rock, withstood. Ottoman losses hit 20,000. Winter approached, supply routes snowbound. Mehmed, pragmatic despite rage, ordered retreat in October. Before leaving, he commanded a new fortress built in central Albania. Using his army as labor, Elbasan rose in 25 days, a massive structure with high towers, moats, and barracks, named to dominate the valleys. It served as a permanent garrison, choking Albanian movements and resupply. Mehmed claimed victory in dispatches, citing the fortress and Kidna's fall, but privately acknowledged failure. He had thrown his empire's might at a small land and withdrawn bloodied. Albania lay ruined, fields black, livestock gone, famine looming. Skanderbeg descended to count costs, thousands dead, economy shattered, but the core held. A brief respite followed, but exhaustion showed. At 62 in 1467, Skanderbeg's body bore scars from 20 battles, white beard framing a face lined by strain. He needed reinforcements, grain, funds. He journeyed to Rome, arriving during Christmas festivities. In the Vatican's halls, amid cardinals in rich robes and golden artifacts, he appeared worn, cloak tattered, voice steady but pleading. Before Pope Paul II and European envoys, he described Albania as Christendom's frontline. "We bleed so you may thrive." He requested a crusade, troops to match Mehmed's hordes. Responses came as applause, titles like Champion of Christendom, a blessed sword and helmet, modest gold for payroll. But no armies. Kings like Matthias Corvinus of Hungary and Frederick III of the Holy Roman Empire cited their wars. Skanderbeg returned empty-handed, certainty growing. He alone stood between his people and oblivion. In January 1468, he convened the League in Lezhë for an offensive against Elbasan. Rumors of Ottoman raids stirred. Even bedridden, he called for armor and horse, instinct driving him. Malaria, carried by mosquitoes from marshlands, struck hard. The fever swords couldn't defeat. Confined, he gathered officers, men who had charged cannons without fear, now tearful at his fate. His final words urged cohesion. Unity is your strength, divide, and you fall. On January 17th, he died at 63. Silence fell, soldiers' cries echoed through valleys. Legend claims his white stallion, companion through victories, refused riders and food, dying of sorrow, a tale reflecting the bond. News reached Mehmed in Constantinople. No celebration, he paused, then spoke, Asia and Europe belong to me now. Woe to Christendom, they have lost their sword and shield. The Sultan recognized the shift. Without Skanderbeg, Albania was vulnerable. The League dissolved quickly. Clans reverted to feuds, Ducagini versus Thopia, Thopia against Venetians. Mehmed exploited this, conquering piecemeal. Svetograd fell in 1466 already, others followed. Cluj, defiant twice, surrendered in June 1478 after a year-long siege by Mehmed's son Bayezid. Starved defenders accepted safe passage, Ottomans broke it, massacring men, enslaving survivors. The eagle flag came down, replaced by the crescent. Shkodër held longest, a rocky fortress defended by Venetians and Albanian remnants in 1478 to 1479. Mehmed bombarded with the era's heaviest artillery, cannons firing 1,200-pound balls for weeks. Defenders ate rats, boiled leather, repelled assaults. After 8 months, they yielded. Mehmed entered ruins, claiming the Balkans. Conquest triggered exodus. Thousands, nobles, peasants, clergy, fled coasts, boarding Venetian ships with scant belongings. They sailed to southern Italy, settling in Calabria, Sicily, Puglia. Ferdinand of Naples, repaying Skanderbeg's aid, granted lands. These arborish formed communities, maintaining Albanian dialect, Byzantine rites, folk songs. In isolated villages, they preserved Skanderbeg's memory through ballads and festivals, a cultural vault while mainland Albania Islamized under Ottoman rule. Ottomans sought erasure. Churches became mosques, statues smashed. In 1478, Janissaries raided his Lezhë grave for bones as talismans, blending fear with superstition. Yet the legend persisted underground, in arborish tales, northern Albanian whispers, European chronicles. Skanderbeg's impact endures in delays. His 25-year hold diverted Ottoman resources during their zenith, sparing Italy, Austria, Hungary invasions. Historians like Edward Gibbon and Fan Nolly argue he bought time for the Renaissance. Florence and Venice flourished while he fought. Without him, Mehmed might have reached Rome, altering history. Modern Albania honors him, national hero, flag unchanged since Cruz, statues in Tirana and abroad. Operas by Vivaldi, poems by Longfellow, biographies spread his archetype, the defiant leader against overwhelming force. He didn't win territory but forged identity, resilient through centuries of occupation, wars, communism. Freedom, he showed, demands constant defense, through cunning, courage, sacrifice. His stand reminds that one person's resolve can echo eternally. If this conclusion on endurance moves you, like the video. Comment, who represents defiance in your history? Subscribe and share for more untold epics.